welcome to my studio.
Love Boy Studio, action!
I thought it'd be a really nice idea to get us all together in a social distancing tea party. Charles Jeffrey, one of my longtime collaborators and friends, and Tim Walker. So, Tim, I met you when I first moved to London 12 years ago.
Was that 12 years? Oh my God.
Yes, crazy. I moved from Manchester after studying my makeup course, and I knew that London was like the place I wanted to be. I met Tim on a bus, and at the same time when I was going out in East London, I met you.
I was like 17 or 18. I saw you on the street, and I remember you from MySpace, because Lucy used to be called Goose on MySpace.
Lucy Goosey.
Lucy Goosey, and walked past and I was like, oh my God, are you Goose from MySpace? And you were just like, oh, the fuck are you?
I think I had glitter eyebrows on the bus when I met you.
I think you did,
Yeah, like crazy blusher.
From my point of view at that time, it felt like I hadn't seen you, your creativity and your beauty. It's almost like everything had been hidden. Mm-hmm. I felt like the club scene, art students, there was such a sort of ordinariness to it. There was very little flamboyance in it. So for a photographer suddenly to see someone like you on a bus on a grey day in February, it just felt like there was something that you could drag out that I would love to take a picture of, which you did.
I remember like viewing you guys from afar, like up in Scotland from MySpace, and just being like so like, oh my God, I just really want to get to London. I want to like be with people that look like this. And then seeing it suddenly in the ID, that one of you like this.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking, God, there's like a real, like something's really happening in London. Like there was a moment where, you know, it was being reflected in fashion. It was in music as well. People were dressing like that in music, and it was in the club scene. There was this kind of weird energy at the time, which was super.
But I think, Lucy, you were a trailblazer of that. Because
great.
you were wearing it. You were it in reality on the street when you were 18 or 19.
Yeah, I think.
And then I saw it as a photographer, and then you were going out with it, and it was like a magnet.
Totally.
And all your friends and where you lived at that point, that junction, just is it Hackney Road, wasn't it? Yeah, it was sort of like that was.
It was like such a hub for it.
It was a magnet.
And I think, I mean, for me personally, like, I went to, like, a private girls' school, like, my whole life, and I always felt different. So when I moved to Manchester and I started studying makeup, I was like, I just really just felt like this was what I wanted to do. So I just put everything but the kitchen sink on my own face, because I was just so excited to, like, be creating, because I'm from Blackburn, a very small town, and if you look slightly different, you get called out for it. Honestly, I like look back at pictures and I'm like, what was I doing? But I love it so much.
I love that. I feel like I've gone like the opposite way to you. Like when I first turned up to London, I was just like viewing everything and just taking everything in. Maybe backcombing my hair, but like not really wearing like the makeup.
Was that a horrors influence?
It was just like, oh, the horrors. Like just did some eyeliner, but I think, you know, I was just so satisfied by just being and seeing everybody like look the way that they did, and just really being like a dry sponge to it. That then when it kind of it died out after a while, you know, as most things do, it kind of goes in peaks and troughs. It was like, you know, this really kind of like visual time, and then it kind of turned into something a little bit more pared back. And then I think after that, I just really craved that, and I think that's when I started kind of really wanting to express it in my own way, and, you know, remembering that time.
I mean, you still are, babes. You give me life every day when I see your face. I'm like, I wish I could still do that on myself.
We should do. I feel like it would be such a fab like Halloween costume. Oh my God, we should totally dress as each other for Halloween.
Oh my God, done. I'm there.
Why don't you
have a
still
Halloween
do that?
party?
Why don't you do that though? Why don't you wear makeup like that?
I feel like I did it so much in my youth, and I feel like I've changed so much as a person. It's not like I was ever embarrassed by the way I look, but I just feel like now I'm like more refined, and I just can't imagine myself doing like that kind of makeup.
Right. I think that's what I've as a photographer, I've always loved people that are trailblazing the difference. And so like you saying that you put makeup on and you didn't think about it, you didn't care when people heckled at you or were rude to you. It's that sort of thing. It's that defiance that I find really attractive in people. That they're just, no matter what they are. And because they are cutting through and innovating what we perceive as beautiful, which is what you're doing in your fashion design. I think it's sort of like it's unapologetic. This is what it is. It's so attractive, I think.
Right, I think it was very much sparked off, and the catalyst for, I think, that way of working or trying to achieve that sort of like look all the time with the work that I do is from the club scene, from when we did the club night. I was amongst all of these people that it felt kind of similar to when I was in London when I first came, like taking in all of these people, like seeing them and being really inspired. And again, when we kind of did Loverboy for the first time, I was meeting all these really amazing people, like Jack Appleyard and Jenkin Van Zyl, these people who were like trailblazers. They were like completely unapologetic, like Kevin Legrand, Josephine Jones, all of these people were just like really unapologetically like present in who they were, and subsequently their looks sort of reflected that. And I think for me, like I just remember thinking, Christ, like, why not just look like this all the time, or why not try and achieve this level, or push it to a new, push things to a new realm. So I think like whenever we work together, I'm always like, well, why not try and like, replicate a painting on a face, or try and push it to a new level, because it's an opportunity for us to really flex our muscles, I think.
I mean, you really do give me some challenges, Charles. I think it was one of your first or second shows, and I'd done this like gorgeous makeup, like white base and glamorous eyes and a little gold cupid's bow, and you were like, something's not right, and you got a wet tea towel, and you smudged the entire face, and I was like, and then I looked at it and I was like, perfect. I was like, you've actually just made the look, and you pushed me outside like my boundaries and things that, like places that I never knew I could go. And I feel that because we did grow up on the club scene and we had those mutual interests, that it does show in our work and like how we like have progressed together. Yeah,
just like when you just like get it, I think kind of like it all gels. And I think the same thing with you is like, one thing I always love about your work, and that you're such a zeitgeist, and you can get and understand so many different points of view of people and see something in somebody.
But I think that's because I think photographers need that, because you are only as good as the people you're photographing. That's where it's like, if it isn't for you, I'm photographing myself, and I think any individual, there's only so much. So I think that's why you're always looking for someone to surprise you, and you're looking for confidence in someone else who's doing something innovative or pushing. I'm always looking for people that are pushing boundaries, I think, that need to be pushed and questioned. And that's what both of you have done, and all the people you mentioned, they all were doing that. And then they're my subjects. They're the people I like to take pictures of.
Like, I would almost say that you're playing our instruments in a different way as a photographer. So like we present you as an...
Good analogy.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good analogy. It's, again, that's the point of the camera. It puts it's through a different lens. It's life through a different lens. And I think that's, you're inspiring Lucy and you're inspiring Charles, and that cross-pollination of energies is where innovation happens, I think. So I think, I'm looking at you and what you do and showing it to you through a different lens, because I've got a point of view on that, and I suppose I'm mixing my take on it. You give a bit of paper to anyone and ask them to draw an owl, everyone's going to draw an owl in a different way. And I think that's what's so interesting. That's the point of creativity. It's that expression from individuals in a different way that show a different thing. And you had a very specific way of what that show meant to you, whereas a photographer, I only see the surface. I just see what's in front of me, and it's a very instinctive reaction to the surface. Whereas you've gone down in depth. There's a reason, there's a point, there's texts you've read, there's films you've watched, there's such a thing, it means a lot to you. Whereas I'm just looking at it, because that's what a photograph is. A photograph is an immediate 2D graphic shape that either resonates universally or it doesn't. It's a very immediate thing.
I also just love the way that you interact with the subject. Like, being the subject to begin with, like 12 years ago, I was shitting myself when you were in my little flat in Shoreditch taking a photo. I remember the first shot was in our gross bathroom, and I had no idea what to do because I hadn't modelled before, and you just make people feel at ease, and it's so comfortable, and you just give like little directions And it just, I mean, even watching you when I do makeup and watching how you interact with models, it's just so interesting, like, to see how you work, because the smallest guidance, you can just see, like, the magic that, like, happens in front of the camera.
Subtle, yeah. In a way, I enjoy more than the actual image. In the end, the picture you make is the experience of the day.
Yeah.
Anchoring down like a moment in time.
Yeah. Sort of like that combination, those energies that we were talking about between you two. I love seeing people shine. I love seeing people just be their best, and I love that. And I love someone that isn't going through the motions. So the fact that you've never been in front of a camera before, and I could see your confidence and your lack of concern about how people perceived you. It was just for you. I was really impressed by that.
It's funny how you say that, because when you were taking my photos, I was so unconfident. Even though I was, like, did like my own makeup and had my hair done and had these amazing Chanel clothes, I was like obsessed with Chanel. I, as a person, was so unconfident in, like, the way I look. But then I just felt that you brought, like, the best out of me when I saw the pictures. Like, I just cried. Like,
but I think that vulnerability actually is very photogenic. I think people who have a vulnerability in it, because that's something we can all relate to. We're all unsure of ourselves, we're not enough this, we're too much of that, that we're all constantly criticising our self-image. But that's just human. So vulnerability is actually a very beautiful thing. It's the person or the object that is invulnerable that actually is unphotogenic. It sort of becomes just a sort of, which is why I think I'm really concerned about, or was concerned, less so now, but I was very concerned about the perfection of an overly digitized image, because it actually loses emotion. Because you were vulnerable, that was a very appealing thing to me, because I saw you as a heroic person. You were walking down Clerkenwell dressed like that with that makeup on, and I was like, oh, what a heroine. And I wanted to document that aspect of your heroic stepping out the front door and going out into London on that day and having people shout at you. That is a very photogenic thing.
And it's funny how people see things differently to you. There was one image, the one where I was on the steps, the stairs, and it was like full body. I was wearing like very skimpy, like tight things, and for me, like, looking at that, I was like, oh my god, I look awful. Just like my body, I wasn't happy. But the amount of people that said to me afterwards that was the picture that they loved the most. I remember Dominic Jones, he was like, that picture to me just really said something. And it's just like having like the nice things that were said. Like, I was like, why did I think that picture wasn't great? I mean, not that it wasn't a good picture, but just like the way that I looked, I was like, but no, I love it.
But it bursts your bubble, isn't it? It's that thing where, you know, it bursts your bubble and you are constantly kind of like, as you were saying, like criticising yourself and, you know, self-deprecating, and sometimes that can be something that you just kind of have in your own way, and sometimes a photographer or, you know, someone in your life can just kind of like pop that and make you see things in a different way, or present it to the public and be a catalyst for you to see things in a different way, like that image. And, you know, Dominic saying all these things, like I think it's honesty. If you let go and reveal your vulnerability, it's extraordinary how many other people see that as bravery, and it means so much. I was thinking when you were talking about that idea of the human interaction being such a valid aspect of photography, and obviously in this time where that's being questioned, and like the fact that, you know, we might not be able to validate a big group of people or create a huge kind of dynamic, or, you know, even like a small one in certain cases because of that person maybe feeling a certain way about it. I'm quite curious to know, knowing about this potential constraint, like where's your mind kind of been ping-ponging to?
I think that first off, I think anyone who is creative, such as yourself, I could put you anywhere with any quantity of no people or 100 people. You could fill a Wembley Stadium and do something extraordinary, or you could just do something in your downstairs bathroom. You know, I think that is the point of creativity. It's about a resourcefulness and working with what you have in front of you. And I think that is what creates change. And I think we've all done things for a period of time and had a certain liberty and freedom to do them in a certain way. I think it's really exciting for us to work with certain boundaries and see what strange fruit comes up. Because I think strange fruit it's exciting to see what cross-pollination is. Like you talking about you two working together and you feeling that thing where you're actually designing, and it's all about crossing the T's and dotting the I's and sewing and form and mathematical and working about finance and logistics, and then suddenly having that explosion of paint and colour that is you, and then you bouncing off one another, and that liberty. I think that's where the excitement is. I don't think we're going to go back to business as usual, and I think that's the exciting point. I think the exciting point is that we're moving into a very new beginning, and new beginnings, how fabulous is that? It's like we reached a period of world acceleration that was beginning to ostracize the human being. We as animals, we are natural beings, we move at a certain pace, and I think the acceleration through the computer of this frenzied existence of them making demands on you to deliver certain things and speed, and the whole fashion industry is this frenetic wheel that was turning too fast. And I think with that wheel turning at that speed, beauty is at a premium. True beauty and touching emotion takes time, and it's a slowing down. And I think that modesty of existence will see, it will sort the wheat from the chaff, and we will see who has it and who has got that ability to bend and morph into something fantastic.
Yeah.
What do you see? What do you see as a designer? Where are you going with what you're doing, and what is your vision within these parameters?
I think the key word for me is localization. Yeah. And I think that ultimately, I hope that it kind of goes back to a time where, people who used to make clothing for themselves, they would work with the cobblers down the road and the kind of tanners down the road, and, work with the manufacturer up, into a different, just a couple of miles away, very local. Obviously, every designer and every house has its own look, and it has its own way of working, and that's why everybody buys from different houses. But I like this idea that everybody can make every house, even though they might have a different aesthetic, they'll all probably have a similar white shirt, and it'll all be made probably in a similar factory and made in a certain way. Whereas I love this idea of this this change that has happened, of really spurring people on to maybe sew things in different ways. Maybe there's a method that's done that's not like a French seam, it's like a different way. A Y chromosome seam, and it's like a kind of wrapped around in a certain way, or it's glued together and stapled, or sellotape. I don't know, I really like this idea of people coming up with their own rules of making clothes, and then that being validated, and hopefully the ability to manufacture it in a modest way that keeps that ability or that technique going and lasting a long time. That's for me, which I find is super refreshing and interesting. Regionality, individuality, there's a charm to that's been lost with a globalized, flattened out blandness, I think. The word that I think the antithesis, the word that I really don't want to go back to, which I probably will use tomorrow at some point in a meeting, but industry standard. The industry standard of, this is industry standard, this is the way that you're supposed to make things, or this is the way that, there's industry standard, well, I'm sorry that it has to be wrapped this way because this is industry standard. I'm well, fuck industry standard, because, why does it have to be industry standard? I mean, obviously, there's a compliance and it makes things streamlined, whatever, but I wonder whether, what's the Loverboy standard, or, what's the Lucy Bridge standard, what's Tim Walker standard.
Well, that's where it's interesting, because everyone's different. Lucy, what about you? When you think about your future, I've been thinking a lot about the hair and the makeup artists that I work with, or the people that are very tactile, with the subjects that we work with. How do you see your future as someone that actually touches people you've never met before? That's what your job is.
I mean, it was a huge shock when lockdown happened and having to obviously be at home, and for you, you are still able to work. It is different, but you are still able to keep your business afloat, whereas for me and a lot of hairdressers, nail artists, even stylists, we have just not been able to work as such on models. But it's been quite interesting because I've been working on a few projects with Selfridges for one, and we've been building, I was supposed to do a beauty shoot with them before lockdown, and their idea was to get a 3D artist to build the makeup look. So for over 2 months we've been going back and forth with all the different artists and then creating a 3D model of, they want it to look like makeup on a real model, not like a cyborg or an alien. And it's been quite a good project for them as well, because it's like something completely different, because they're not used to doing makeup. Like one of the ones was the Baroque dystopian look that I did on you for Day's Beauty.
So
And
because I'm not sure what you mean, so you just take a raw face
yeah.
and then you work with someone who's good on a computer to put the makeup on through digitally.
Yeah, so the way I've been doing it is I've got like a face chart on the iPad and I use an app to create and sketch and paint on the iPad my makeup designs, and then they then take that and all the reference images and all of my descriptions of I want this watercolory blush or of pale face, and then they create it in a 3D model. And the artists of what they've created, honestly, it's like breathtaking. It's really, for me, it was like a totally different way of working.
Well, it is.
Right, so should we segue into another chapter of the evening?
Sure.
Should we have a jelly or a slice of cake or?
If you want, do you want to cut the cake?
Yeah, shall I?
So my friend, who's a neighbour, is a really great baker. So she made it.
Yeah.
I iced it.
Yeah.
And then Charles has decorated it.
Okay.
It's been a joint effort. It's beetroot and chocolate.
I think we need to film it. Get in on it, isn't it?
This smells so good. So what is in this cake?
Beetroot and chocolate, apparently.
Oh my god.
What?
Babe, this cake. I'm going to take some home with me.
You have to.
Oh my god, this is amazing. So who did this for you, that menu?
My friend Ashley, she's a calligrapher. She's got a company called Pale Press London.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's one of my oldest friends. She used to model for me as a model when I was doing makeup.
Really?
In Manchester, yeah.
What, so she actually... Is it kind of like graphic design kind of calligraphy? That's so interesting. I'm really, really getting... Like, I'm finding myself gravitating so much towards, like, font and graphics and, like, the beauty in that.
Well, I guess
and,
because
like,
you use it so much for your work as well, and like the way that you draw as well. Like your logos and...
But I've always loved that idea of, you know, there's people who can tell someone's personality by their handwriting.
Yeah.
I love that.
You've got amazing handwriting. I always love like your like Christmas party. Like, do you do those yourself? Like the Christmas party invitations. This one as well, right?
Yeah.
That's the note that Tim gave me on the bus. Yeah, you've got such an artistic handwriting.
Have I?
You can tell that you've got like an artistic flair. Like he knows what he's doing.
What else? Where can we go with
Charles?
For me, what I'm finding really interesting is, I mean, I had this conversation today with my team. Like, we're always kind of discussing, I feel like, as I mentioned before, a large part of my job is kind of logistics and being a leader and kind of managing people and sort of, you know, dealing with a lot of different things outside of just, you know, making fashion and drawing. There's a lot of other kind of like management stuff that I kind of sink into. And so we've been having a lot of conversations about the role of the studio and the role of, you know, how we can navigate the work that we need to do, because it's a lot of work, you know, having to, you know, liaise with factories and try and find other factories that can work for us, that have, like, you know, that are able to work during this time, and then also kind of logistically sending things to places in order to be made, and then at the same time also making toiles and fitting garments. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into, well, at this moment, trying to kind of navigate what is usually quite...
So your next show is June?
It was supposed to be June.
And what's happened? That's so interesting to know. How has it been delayed or?
Yeah, so basically the collection that we were designing for June is now going to happen in September. So we've kind of compartmentalised it now, because
how many is in your team?
Well, there's 5 of us, and then it's just the 3 of us as the kind of core team who are kind of like, you know, there's a lot of Naomi, myself and Sam. So Sam's very much logistics operations, and Naomi is kind of production and manufacturing, but she's been with me from the very beginning, and then, you know, I'm me. But then, you know, it's navigating the interns that we have, and then, you know, what does that look like? It can't just be like, it was very difficult that immediate kind of time, because we had to put a lot of thinking into how we could scale the business down, the work down, step by step, instead of it being this kind of like extreme cut, because I don't think that that's really good for morale, like just suddenly furloughing everybody when there is work to be done. We just need to think about a way to
How we're going to do it.
Life hasn't stopped. It's just a way of like adapting and figuring out how you can still work under like the restrictions that have been put in place.
I think I've not been funny. I feel like I've been more busier because of this, just through kind of, again, just thinking outside of the box and trying to find ways. I mean, I'm trying to set myself projects. Obviously, working the collection that we were supposed to do for June has been moved to September. There was a lot of time that had to go into curating what essentially we wanted to design, because we didn't want to do a big ostentatious collection. We didn't want to do like a big ostentatious show. It was like, okay, well, we spent a lot of time making these beautiful fabrics and commissioning these fabrics. Let's just put them into really beautiful pieces of clothing that people want to wear, and it's very practical and it's beautiful and it's just something that makes you feel nice. And we were having conversations like, what does everybody... It felt very... I actually will say that the season that we're going to show in September is probably the most democratic collection that I've ever made. It's not like my singular vision. It feels very...
You've really listened to what people want.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you think overall, what do people want?
I mean, I feel like people want something that feels essential and something that feels that it lasts long and something that they can grow with and that carries personality and that they can morph and change with.
Yeah.
I mean, this suit, for example, I bought in New York for $20 like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And its buttons have fallen off and it's ripped and stuff.
But then
this
you made
suit,
it your own.
Exactly. And the suit means so much to me. And I part of the reason that the charm of it is that it was $20, but I'd like to think that some of the pieces that we have, whether the print fades away with time and it turns into something else, or it's something that you can adjust to suit your body shape as you're working. I mean, the small details like that, but then I'm also thinking about the quality of fabric. Like for me, before I was always a bit scared of fabric because I didn't know it so well, and I think now, after working as a designer for 5 years, I'm really starting to understand what, within our Loverboy world, what quality actually feels like and what we want to put out as a form of quality in our own localized way, and putting that as a thing. And I think it's like, something that's hard wearing, something that like really can adapt to your mood and is universal, but then also makes you feel like an individual as well. So
quite a tall order, isn't it? Well, have you been working on ideas for makeup? Have you come up with ideas?
I have been using the iPad as like a resource, and you do that a lot, and it's such a good way because it's got so many different colour options, so many different textures. I teamed up with one of my model friends, Maggie Mauer.
Oh yeah, no, Maggie.
You've shot Maggie.
Yeah.
And so her boyfriend is a photographer, so he at home took pictures of her, just really simple, clean headshots. And then I started sketching makeup ideas like on top of her face.
Right. Yeah.
And it was just so therapeutic, and I just spent like a whole day doing it, and I just like got lost in it. And because it's hard, because I don't enjoy doing makeup on myself, like I was saying before. I need something in front of me so I can see like the different angles.
Yeah, someone like Maggie sitting in front of you. She's
dream.
fabulous.
She's got such a great face. So I've just been like doing makeup sketches, and it's like you need something like visual and you need like real features. So I've been really enjoying doing things like that.
Where do you, when you make up, where do you derive inspiration from? Do you look at nature?
Yeah, nature and art.
Right,
art,
painting.
I really
for sure.
miss going to exhibitions. I mean, you can look at things online, but when you really like see something in front of you,
encountering a painting.
Yeah, and you can see like the brush strokes and the textures and like how the colours have merged into each other. You can't get that from a book.
No.
Like, you need to be able to see it. Yeah. And even just like the colours in nature. I mean, I was researching for one of these digital 3D models that I was doing sketches for, and I was looking a lot of like mould and like bacteria in like petri dishes, because like just like the colours that you can get from like fungus and scientific things. It's just, amazing, like the colours that like merge together. But I can pull inspiration from anywhere if I see something that's interesting.
But mainly you would say encountering art firsthand.
Yeah.
and nature.
Yeah.
They're your two primary sources of inspiration.
Yeah, because I love working with colour and texture and bold. I like anything bold and like powerful, almost like quite aggressive as well. And I feel like painting is like, it can be very aggressive.
I would say your work is very graphic as well. Like I think there's a real graphic quality to the way that you work, and even when it is something that is super kind of like expressive, there is always a graphic element in it, and I think that that's where you always kind of go back to, even if it's something that, like, going back to that thing of taking the makeup away with the paper towel back in Vogue Fabrics, there was still an element of you going back in and just applying a mark just to kind of like get your Virgo control back on it. And I think that's like articulated in like, this kind of graphic line, or there's something that just happens, it's like a blush that's just like this, or it's something that just happens that really pulls it back in.
But I mean, you can always go on to a shoot with ideas, but when you're with a photographer, with a stylist or a designer, and you then start speaking, your ideas can literally do like a
U-turn.
and go in a completely different direction, because you
that's
need
what keeps them
people
alive.
to bounce off.
I think when, just as a photographer, when the photograph is what you visualised, it's dead. I think when you go in with an idea and then I talk to you and then I talk to you and then that kind of changes it, and then it's always moving. I think as long as that creativity is in perpetual challenge and moving, it will be forever alive. It's when a photograph, or whether it's something you've designed, or it's very much what you thought it was going to be, it's almost disappointing.
Yeah.
I guess to that note, I've always been very curious to know, and I think because we've got your book in the flat, the To the Moon.
Oh, Shoot for the Moon.
Shoot for the Moon, sorry. There's that photograph of it's the McQueen Lee Bowery collection with all the red and the umbrella hats, and then they're covered in the plastic tarpauling, and they're like that. And I feel like that, as you were saying, it's something that, as you were saying about it shifting, and then you kind of just anchoring down. It felt like that's something. It was just, again, it was a moment.
That's just
how did that come to play?
That we had the 5 models sitting there in that collection, which is an astounding thing to look at.
It's
anyway.
Amazing.
Lucia Peroni was doing the makeup, and because it was quite heavy, she was doing this very red lip that I think maybe leaded in the shot. I can't remember.
It was like the Lee Bowery,
and it was going on the floor, and we had this very thin plastic, and then I turned on a fan, and then that just whipped up, and I could see it flapping on the corner, and then I was just like, lift the whole, and then it just went over them, and then the fan stuck to them, and then all the makeup, because what Lucia was doing was it just moved, and then
that's the beauty of it.
That's what I'm talking about. Then that was the life that when you and Julian look at that picture now, the life that you feel from that photograph is the life that happened. If it was just how I imagined it to be and they were just standing there posed, you wouldn't be attracted to that. I'm sure of it. I think creativity loves chaos and mistakes, because that's when you, like what you were talking about taking the makeup off the face.
That's when you find like the real magic. Like, I mean, even watching you shoot over the years, when we were in Scotland with Stella Tennant and Jean Campbell, and we were on like the Scottish moors, and you were taking a photo and you just picked up some twigs off the ground and just like shoved them in Jean's hair or put them in her hand, and it's those tiny little details that really like just like finish the photo off. That's like I find really interesting. It's like it's not restricted,
and it's just always, the wind is always blowing, things are always going wrong. It's going to pour with rain, all of that. That's the best way to make pictures. This connects, I think, to vulnerability. And people, what we were talking about, vulnerable people being photogenic, I think perfection actually isn't so interesting. Like a beautiful day that you think you're going to go out and take a picture, it's always the surprising things.
Yeah, I agree.
That astound and take your breath away.
Yeah.
What are your primary sources of inspiration? Like we were talking about nature and art. Are you nature and art?
You're all about the research though. When you give research packs for his shows and where it's going with makeup, it's so varied. Like it can be like PDFs, like.
But what would you say, Charles, is primary? Is there a constant thing that you notice?
Like it's like I wish I could come up with a word that was that thing.
Is it elemental?
Yeah, I've been really kind of not dabbling is the wrong word, but just sort of like interested in things like magic and like crystals and stuff like that, in comparison to necessarily maybe reading a book or something. You know, there's sometimes this
you react to it on an instinctive belly way that just actually starts something off, and it's elemental. I'm sure.
I mean, even just like, you know, I was reading all of this stuff. There's this small kind of like beginner's guide to magic book, and I remember reading about how important the moon is in it, and just how important just like a full moon is, and if you ever are in the presence of a full moon, just like how present you should really feel. And I remember I was walking home, having read that day about it, and thinking, oh fuck, it's a full moon today, walking home, and then just like going down the straight road, and the moon was just literally in the middle of the road as I was going, and I just was looking at it, and I was like, this is I was like, this is a gift. And I was like literally looking at that, I was like, I feel you, I'm the same as you. And I was like, it was just this weird moment, and I could just feel, and it was this weird goosebump that went down my body like nothing else, and it was just, there's something about that moment. It's just like
elemental,
but it's like
human, animal,
it's primal.
A primal's a good word for you.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Primal,
especially being a Leo.
Like heavy chest. But you know, you have to remember that, you know, we've evolved really quickly in our minds, but our bodies and our chemistry is different, so that we have the same chemistry as, like, say, caveman who needs this stress if they're being attacked by a bear, or what you call the saber-toothed tiger, or William Hammett. And so, like, you know, if those things are still the same, that surely there's something in us that, like, you know, when we would look at the moon or look at the sun, like these big orbs of light, like we would project so much onto them. And I feel like when I was looking at that moon that one time, I was thinking, God, all my past lives or all my things all aligning with one.
Something about ancestors with you as well. I think about ancestors and ghosts of the past.
Yeah, there's almost like a darkness. Like you as a person you're so light and welcoming, and you'll speak to anyone. But like there's also like the darkness within the work, and I mean I love like the sinister touches, especially with the last show.
That last show for me felt really close to, I think that one and Tantrum, which is actually the ones that the ones that you've been to actually, have felt like the most closest to what I want to express or where I've come from, or something that I feel. I think everyone has like a mission sometimes in their work, that they have to achieve something. No, it's more like when you're a creative person, it's like you're on a mission given to you by that gift. And I think that there's something in when I do those types of shows where it feels like I'm really connected. I'm connected. Honouring my mission. And it's weird because, as you say, like I do love being positive, and I think I try and express that, but in my day-to-day life as much as possible. But you know, not to compare, I am a very different person to the great McQueen, but I think that there's some things when you see in his work that he was trying to scratch an itch, and he was trying to achieve something with every show that he was trying to do, you know, and sadly to his own demise. But I think that, not that I'm saying that I'm in the same realm, I think there's a different kind of thing, but I think that when you do touch that world, sometimes there's something really cathartic about it. And I don't know, and I know that you guys have all gone into that world as well.
I think that we've been talking about that already, about the vulnerability. It's your vulnerability again that is actually so important, because that connects you to other people. People that then can relate to it. Your vulnerability, your itch, your anxiety, lack of confidence about something, I think is what makes you appealing. I think as an artist.
Yeah, because if not, you just become too robotic.
Doesn't work. No. Doesn't work for me.
Yeah. We both just did robots. Going off topic, but Gigi Good's robot on RuPaul.
Oh my god!
Dying. Do you watch RuPaul's Drag Race?
No. What I've seen one episode.
You need to go back to the beginning and watch all of them. Like it's just incredible. But there's a new drag queen called Gigi Good, and she did. They have like this game called the Snatch Game, where they have to interpret a celebrity and dress like them, sound like them, and then give answers like they would. And she decided to do a robot, and RuPaul was like, I don't think that's gonna like connect with like the audience, because like no one really knows like a famous robot. And she was like really confident, like, no, I've got this, and she won it. It was incredible.
Yeah, she was basically like reenacting it, just being like, oh, how are you today? And she's like, shut up, bitch. And it was just like, I mean, it's I'm not doing it any justice, but it was just like, it was so funny, like how she kind of really like made it work. But
Yeah, it's been getting me through lockdown, not gonna lie. It comes out every Saturday
watched
morning.
That's a lot.
What's
Lots to
the
watch.
one thing I'm very curious that you have found yourself doing something, even if you are maybe in your own kind of comforted way or your own happy place? Have you noticed, God, I'm doing this quite a lot, or I'm doing this quite a lot, or I'm eating this, or I've read this, or I'm saying this word? I mean, is there something? Have you noticed a weird reaction to this? Yeah.
I think just cooking.
I'm sick of
it's
cooking for
cooking.
myself.
It's just a lot of cooking and a lot of just being in the house, just keeping everything together and going out, walking, being outside, fresh air, so important. Yeah, I think nature's incredibly important to me.
Would you say that's you've reacted to it more than before? Like you've been more kind of mindful of it? I guess?
Really, definitely. What about you? What's your repeat?
I would say kind of cooking as well. That's a really good
Cooking.
one. Like I'm always kind of I'm so much cleaner than I've been before. Like really kind of it's sort of like that sort of settling and making a home kind of nice.
I am a homebody. I've lived on my own for 10 years and I like my own company, but I recently moved flat, so I've really been just like settling in at home, cooking, obviously, like everybody else. I found my mojo with running again.
Okay.
So I used to be a really avid runner, and I just kind of fell out of love with it. And every time I went for a run, I mean, because we used to go running together, it was just such a struggle, and I could never get past like the 5k mark, and I just hated every second of it. Whereas at the beginning of lockdown, I was going every day and like gradually like got up to my 10Ks and just been really enjoying it again and like finding like my fitness mojo. And also it's just nice, relaxing. Like I really enjoy just sitting and watching a film or a series. And
have you spoken to anyone more than you have before? I feel like I speak to my mum more than I
definitely.
ever have, and I'm really close with my mum. I'm really close to my family in general.
It's another imperative thing, isn't it? That it's like nature, family, friends, eating well, you go running. It's your health.
Yeah.
It's the nation's health that's probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
Hence everyone waking up and seeing, applauding the NHS. It's sort of like health, family, friends, good food, as well as food for the soul.
You can ask for more than that.
Yeah,
the beetroot cake.
Still just gives me so much life, that cake.
Okay.
Amazing, perfect. That was great.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was such a fab little...
That went so quick.
Did it? 2 hours?
Almost.
Cut 1
and 2, 3. Cut.